The morning sun cast a golden hue over the sprawling cityscape, its rays piercing through the gaps between towering skyscrapers and illuminating the bustling streets below. Amidst the cacophony of honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and the distant wail of sirens, a solitary figure stood at the edge of the crowd, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for something lost to time. Jonathan Blake, a man in his early 30s with a chiseled jawline and eyes that held the weight of countless untold stories, adjusted the strap of his worn leather satchel and took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of asphalt, street food, and the faint trace of blooming jasmine from a nearby vendor's stall. The city was alive, pulsating with energy, dreams, and secrets, and Jonathan felt both a part of it and apart from it, a paradox he had grown accustomed to over the years. As he navigated the labyrinthine alleys and broad avenues, memories of his childhood surfaced unbidden, painting vivid images of simpler times spent in the countryside, chasing fireflies under starlit skies and listening to his grandfather's tales of heroism and honor. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, buried beneath layers of urban grime and the relentless march of progress. Yet, the core of who he was remained unchanged, a seeker of truth, a bearer of burdens, and a man driven by an unyielding sense of purpose. Jonathan's destination loomed ahead. A nondescript building nestled between a dilapidated bookstore and a vibrant cafe that exuded the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries. The building's facade was unremarkable, its paint peeling and windows clouded with dust, but Jonathan knew better than to judge by appearances. He entered through the creaky door, greeted by the familiar creak of wooden floorboards and the musty scent of aged paper and ink. Inside, rows of filing cabinets stood like sentinels guarding the secrets of countless lives, while a solitary desk, cluttered with papers, photographs, and a flickering desk lamp, occupied the center of the room. Behind the desk sat Eleanor Rigby, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and spectacles perched precariously on the bridge of her nose. "You're late," she remarked without looking up, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced ease. Jonathan offered a sheepish grin, setting his satchel down and pulling out a manila envelope. "Got held up," he replied, placing the envelope on the desk. Eleanor paused, her eyes narrowing as she examined the envelope. "This the one?" she inquired, already knowing the answer. Jonathan nodded, his expression turning solemn. "Yeah, it's him." Eleanor opened the envelope, revealing a series of photographs depicting a man in various locations: a crowded marketplace, a dimly lit bar, a secluded alleyway. Each image captured the subject in candid moments, his features partially obscured but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. "So, it's true," Eleanor murmured, more to herself than to Jonathan. Jonathan leaned against the desk, his arms crossed and eyes distant. "I don't know what he's planning, but it can't be good. Last time he surfaced, things went south real fast." Eleanor nodded, her fingers tapping a rhythmic pattern on the desk. "We need to act fast. If he's here, others won't be far behind." She reached into a drawer, pulling out a worn dossier labeled Project Lazarus. The name sent a shiver down Jonathan's spine, memories of past missions and lost comrades flooding his mind. "You think it's starting again?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and sorrow. "I think it never really ended." Success in the Bennett household had never been an ambiguous word. It had a scent sterilized air in hospital corridors, ink on Ivy League diplomas, polished leather chairs in courtrooms. It had a shape law degrees framed above mahogany desks, research papers with footnotes longer than the conclusions, and children who grew into high-performing professionals with no room for deviation. Rachel had known this her whole life, and from the moment she began to think differently, she also began to disappoint. At age 9, she submitted a science fair project that proposed a biodegradable alternative to plastic using banana fibers. The idea had come to her during a trip to Ghana, visiting her grandmother and watching locals wrap everything in natural materials. She didn't win the fair. Her father, Dr. Gregory Bennett, who had once performed bypass surgery on a senator, had smiled tightly and said, "Emily followed the instructions and got second place. Sometimes the formula works for a reason." That smile would become a fixture in Rachel's memory. Polite, controlled, disappointed in ways that were never spoken but always felt. Emily, her older sister by 3 years, was the golden child. She had gone to Yale, then Harvard Law. She had interned for a federal judge by the time she was 24 and was recently made partner at one of Boston's most elite firms. Rachel, meanwhile, had a resume that made her family nervous. A double major from Stanford in computer science and biomedical engineering. Promising. But then she had chosen to join a mid-tier tech company instead of a hospital or a med school. Disconcerting. And then she quit 2 years in to build something. Alarming. At the Sunday dinners, her father always found a way to highlight Emily's steady rise. Emily just closed a $3 million settlement last week. Her firm is really grooming her for national-level work. Her mother would beam, adding a subtle note, "So proud of both our daughters. One builds cases, the other builds something new." A laugh would ripple across the table, and Rachel would sip her wine in silence. But what no one asked was what Rachel saw in the healthcare system. At TechLife, she had been assigned to a hospital software project. She spent 6 months embedded with a team that helped manage patient transfers for rare disease cases. And what she found broke her. Patients would be misdiagnosed for years. Specialists were separated by geography, insurance barriers, and paperwork so convoluted that by the time some families found the right trial, the child was no longer eligible. A mother wept in front of Rachel after hearing that the trial they needed had started 6 weeks earlier in another state. Rachel saw a system that wasn't broken by accident, it was broken by bureaucracy and design. It wasn't lack of technology that killed people. It was the lack of connection. So she left. She took her small savings, moved into a friend's basement, and began building the earliest version of the algorithm that would later become Connect Care. She recruited Jasmine Washington, a brilliant software engineer she had worked with, and convinced her to help. They coded through nights, learned about regulatory frameworks during lunch, and pitched angel investors on afternoons they hadn't showered. But while they were building something meaningful, Rachel's personal life crumbled. Timothy, her boyfriend of 2 years, began with encouragement. "It's sexy," he had said over cocktails one night. "My girlfriend, the founder, makes me sound like a visionary just for dating you." But when success didn't come quickly, when Rachel turned down a stable job offer to keep coding a product that had no revenue, his support soured. One night, after another argument about rent and lifestyle mismatch, he packed his things. "I thought you'd pivot by now," he said, closing the door behind him. "You're too smart to keep chasing a pipe dream." Rachel never told her family about the breakup. It would have only strengthened their narrative. By year 2, Connect Care had a rudimentary platform. They had mapped data from over 300 clinical trial protocols and designed an intake system that could match patient symptom clusters to trial inclusion criteria with 76% accuracy. They partnered with a clinic in Chicago for beta testing. The early results? Promising. They matched a 12-year-old girl named Eliza, previously turned down by 3 hospitals, to a cutting-edge gene therapy trial. Eliza's mother cried when she told Rachel, "No one believed us until your program said yes." But none of this made headlines, and none of it paid salaries. They had one investor, Rachel's father, or, more precisely, an investment from him complete with signed paperwork and a monthly report schedule. "This is not charity," he had said. "It's a bet I hope pays off." And yet, as time passed, the calls from him turned into lectures. "How's the burn rate? What's your AR? Why haven't you closed Series A?" Her mother would try to soften the blow. "Sweetheart, maybe a job at a medical research institute would let you do the same work but with less pressure." Pressure was the only constant. Rachel started missing birthdays, skipped weddings, lived mostly out of one drawer and a mini fridge in the office. Emily once visited, wearing a pencil skirt that probably cost more than Rachel's mattress. She looked around the workspace and said, "I admire your passion, but you should plan your exit. These things don't always scale." Rachel didn't respond, but that night she worked until her fingers cramped. Still, doubt crept in. Not when Jasmine questioned code or when investors ghosted her, but in moments alone, 3 a.m., by the office window, watching rain blur the skyline, wondering if she'd built a tower of hope too tall for one woman to carry. The tipping point came after 2 major funding rounds collapsed. Their most promising hospital partnership withdrew due to internal realignment. Rachel's bank account dipped below $900. They were weeks away from not being able to pay their cloud service fees. That's when she called her father. They met at his country club, a place so far from her world it might as well have been another planet. He listened to her pitch over a scotch. When she finished, he looked at her not with anger, but pity. "You're chasing a noble idea," he said, "but noble doesn't mean viable. The healthcare system is a beast. If you think you're going to change it with code and courage, you're deluded." "It's already changing," she insisted. "Our match in accuracy is over 90% for some conditions." "But where's the money?" he asked, setting down his glass. "Ideas don't matter without scale. Scale needs capital. Capital needs confidence, and I don't see any." She left that meeting feeling smaller than ever. Jasmine asked her that night, "So, are we dead in the water?" Rachel didn't answer. She just stared at the screen where her algorithm was running simulations on rare disease trial patterns. 2 days later, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Family emergency. Please come home Saturday, 4 p.m. Your father says it's important." Rachel knew exactly what it was, and she was right. That Saturday, she pulled up to the familiar colonial-style home. She hadn't been there in months. The driveway was full, too full. 5 extra cars. She recognized Emily's black Lexus, Uncle Frank's Mercedes, and worst of all, Bradley's Audi, her parents' financial advisor. The front door opened before she could knock. Her mother stood there, wearing that same cautious smile she used when delivering bad news. "Everyone's waiting in the living room," she said. Everyone. Rachel walked in, heart pounding, and realized this wasn't just a check-in. It was a tribunal. Her father stood by the fireplace like a judge. Emily sat on the couch, a legal pad on her lap. Uncle Frank, Aunt Patricia, Dr. Winston, and even Bradley were all arranged in semicircular positions as if planning an ambush with nameplates and witness statements. "What is this?" Rachel asked. Her father motioned to a chair across from him. "Please sit. This is for your future." But Rachel remained standing. "My future doesn't need a courtroom." Her mother tried to interject. "Sweetheart, we're just concerned." "No," Rachel said. "You're not concerned. You're convinced I'm failing and this is your intervention." And she was right. They called it love. They called it support. But what they offered was control wrapped in polite concern. They attacked her metrics, her decisions, her lifestyle, her burnout. They quoted stats they barely understood and offered real jobs at hospitals and firms. Emily read off a list of tech companies hiring former founders. But none of them asked about the patients, about Eliza, about what the technology had already done. All they saw was absence of money and prestige. Rachel stood in the eye of their criticism and realized something startling. They weren't trying to rescue her. They were trying to erase her. Her father leaned forward and said, "Emily made partner because she stayed on the path. You left it, and look where that's taken you." Rachel's hands trembled. Then her mother's phone buzzed. She reached for it instinctively and glanced down. Her eyes widened. "Gregory," she said softly, showing the screen, "you might want to see this." "What is it?" he asked, annoyed. She read the headline aloud. "Healthcare Startup Connect. Care valued at $1 billion, Wall Street Journal." The room fell into stunned silence. Rachel blinked. Then everything changed. The silence after her mother read the headline stretched impossibly long, like the seconds before a bomb goes off. No one moved. Emily's pen slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Uncle Frank blinked rapidly, as if trying to process a language he'd never learned. Bradley, who had spent the last 20 minutes explaining burn rate and exit strategy, and reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. Rachel stood still, her heart pounding. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was disbelief, tangled with an almost painful relief. Her father leaned in and squinted at the screen her mother held. "Is this a mistake?" Emily was already searching her own phone, murmuring, "Wall Street Journal, Connect Care. Oh my God, it's real." Rachel stepped forward and took her mother's phone. She stared at the headline again, as if willing it to vanish. But there it was, in bold font. "Healthcare Startup Connect Care valued at $1 billion in potential acquisition talks with Pharmaceuticals Global." Her legs trembled. She turned on her own phone. 37 missed calls. Jasmine, her lawyer. An unfamiliar number from New York. Notifications lit up her lock screen like fireworks. WSJ, Bloomberg, TechCrunch. Every outlet she'd spent years dreaming of. Now they were here. And they were calling her. She excused herself and stepped out onto the porch. Her thumb found Jasmine's name instantly. The line clicked after the first ring. "Rachel, thank God, have you seen it?" "Yes, just now. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Pharmax's VP of Innovation called the moment they read our clinical accuracy report. They've been watching us ever since Chicago. When I told them we hit 95% match accuracy for certain rare diseases, they flipped, Rachel." Rachel's breath caught. "So this isn't a rumor?" "No, they leaked it," Jasmine said, her voice a mix of anger and awe. "It's a power play. They're trying to anchor public valuation before formal talks. Our lawyers are scrambling." Rachel closed her eyes. "We didn't even know we were for sale." "We're not," Jasmine replied. "But now we have leverage, real leverage." Rachel glanced back through the window. Her entire family was now clustered around Emily's phone. Her father had taken off his glasses. Patricia looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Moments ago, they'd all been so certain. Now, they were scrambling to understand something they had never even tried to believe in. "I need to get to the office," Rachel said. "I'm already here," Jasmine replied. "Bring coffee and maybe body armor. It's going to be a week." Rachel hung up, steeled herself, and stepped back inside. The moment she did, her father looked up. "Rachel, why didn't you tell us you were in talks with Farmach?" "Because we weren't," she replied calmly. "At least, not formally. We had exploratory conversations, and they were under NDA." Emily blinked. "They breached it." "Looks like it." Bradley cleared his throat. "This changes things." Rachel met his eyes. "You think?" He raised his hands in surrender. Her mother stepped closer. "Sweetheart, this is incredible. I always knew you were doing something special." Rachel couldn't help it. She laughed, not out of joy but in sheer disbelief. "This entire gathering was designed to convince me to give up, to tell me I was throwing away my life. And now you're proud?" Her father straightened. "We were concerned for your well-being, Rachel. We didn't have all the facts." "No," she replied. "You didn't care to ask. You judged the absence of visible success as failure." She picked up her purse. "I have to go. I have a company to run, and possibly a billion-dollar deal to negotiate." "Wait," her father said, his voice quieter. "Can we talk about this more privately? Later, when I'm not being staged for public rescue in my childhood living room." As she left, her mother called after her, "Rachel, wait. I'm proud of you. I always have been." Rachel paused but didn't look back. "I wish you'd said that earlier." And then she walked out. By the time she reached the office, the hallway was buzzing with the sound of ringing phones and hurried footsteps. Jasmine looked up from behind two laptops. "Guess we're not invisible anymore," she said. Rachel dropped the coffee on the desk and sat down. "Have we confirmed the article source?" "Our lawyer says it came from Farmach's internal media team, leaked intentionally. They're preparing an acquisition offer. First draft expected by morning." Rachel leaned back, staring at the chaos. "Do we even want to sell?" Jasmine's eyes darkened. "I don't know. I mean, $1 billion. But if we sell, we lose control. And you know what they'll do with our algorithm." Rachel didn't need to ask. They'd use it. Yes, but not for the patients. For optimizing profit, recruitment, and trial funding cycles. They'd prioritize high-return trials, ignore edge case conditions, turn a lifeline into a corporate efficiency tool. Rachel stood. "No, we don't sell, not outright. We propose a partnership. Licensing, not acquisition. We maintain the mission." Jasmine's smile was tired but proud. "That's why I followed you, even when we had $12 in the bank." 3 hours later, their lawyer joined the call. "They'll offer a full buyout, likely with stock options. But I think you're right to push back. This isn't a normal SaaS product. It's medical infrastructure." Rachel nodded. "Then we fight for it." He sighed. "Prepare for resistance. They'll dangle numbers you never dreamed of." "I have dreamed of them," Rachel said. "But not at the cost of the people we're trying to help." Over the next 72 hours, the story exploded. Journalists camped outside the building. Investors they'd pitched to and been rejected by sent sheepish congratulatory emails. Timothy, her ex, texted her, Always knew you were going to change the world. Want to catch up sometime?" She blocked the number. Meanwhile, the platform was crashing under traffic. Rachel and Jasmine took shifts sleeping on the office floor again, just like old times, except now everyone was watching. When the first offer arrived from Farmashk, it was even higher than expected, $950 million, all cash and equity mix. But the clause that struck Rachel most was a short sentence buried on page 12. Buyer shall have sole discretion over platform roadmap post-acquisition. Rachel circled it and read. "This is what they really want," she said. "The engine, without any obligation to drive it where we intended." Jasmine exhaled. "Then we say no." And they did. They countered with a bold proposal, exclusive global licensing of the technology for hospital implementation, with Connect Care retaining core IP and data oversight. $500 million upfront, revenue share, co-branding, regulatory joint teams. It was unheard of for a company of their size. But Connect Care wasn't small anymore, not after Eliza, not after Chicago, not after the Wall Street Journal. And now they were a symbol. On Thursday morning, a reply came from Farmash's VP, board reviewing counteroffer. You've given them a lot to think about. We'll revert within 48 hours. Rachel stood by the window as the sun rose. 2 years ago, she stood in this same spot, staring into the same skyline, wondering if it would ever matter. And now the world was listening. But, most of all, the system designed to silence people like her was being forced to listen. She turned to Jasmine. "Let's get back to work." On Friday morning, the reply came. Subject line, Connect Care Counter Offer, Board Decision. Rachel sat alone in the glass-walled conference room, sunlight spilling over the table, her fingers trembling as she hovered over the email. She could hear the faint hum of Jasmine typing outside, and the quiet murmur of voices from their now 10-person team, most of whom had joined in the last 3 weeks, hired in a blur of emergency scaling. She clicked open the message. "We appreciate your counter-proposal and the clarity of your vision. After careful consideration, the board of Farmash Global has agreed in principle to pursue a strategic partnership rather than acquisition. A revised term sheet is attached." Rachel scanned the PDF. Her heart stopped. $500 million upfront licensing deal. Global rights. Core technology remains with Connect Care. Co-branded rollout across Europe and North America. Patient Data Ethics Oversight Board with Rachel as chair. Yearly performance-based bonuses. Optional buyback clause after 5 years. They had done it. They hadn't just won. They had changed the rules. She stood up and walked into the main office, where Jasmine was sipping cold coffee and staring at code. Rachel held up the paper silently. Jasmine blinked. Wait, they agreed? They did. All of it. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears before her lips could even form a smile. "Oh my God," she whispered. Rachel felt her knees weaken and sat on the edge of the nearest desk. "We kept the soul of it, Jazz. And we have money to scale. And reach more Elizas. And tell the world you don't have to sell out to win." They laughed through tears, exhausted, relieved, overwhelmed, but grounded. They knew this was only the beginning. By Monday morning, the media had picked up the new deal. Headlines replaced the billion-dollar valuation with a more surprising truth. Founder turns down acquisition, builds healthcare alliance on her own terms. Rachel's inbox filled with interview requests, news anchors, tech shows, podcasts, but the email that meant the most came from her father. "Rachel, I read the updated coverage. I didn't understand what you were building. I see it more clearly now. I owe you a real conversation." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she called Emily. Her sister had surprised her the previous week, showing up with champagne, offering legal counsel, flagging flaws in the original acquisition draft that neither Rachel nor their lawyer had caught. Emily, who once rolled her eyes at tech dreams, had now helped protect one. Over lunch, Rachel shared the good news. Emily raised her glass. This is legacy work. I've done billion-dollar deals, but this, you're saving lives. I'm just glad I got to help, even a little." "You helped more than a little," Rachel said softly. Emily looked down. "I wish I'd listened sooner." Rachel placed a hand on hers. "You showed up when it counted." Later that week, Rachel agreed to meet her father at his office. It was a strange reversal. For years, she had been the one summoned, called to explain herself, to justify her choices. But this time, he had asked for time, and she had given it, with boundaries. They sat across from each other. The room smelled of polished wood and antiseptic, like always. "I read the terms," he said. "Very smart structuring. You didn't just win, you held the line." "I had help," she replied simply. He studied her for a long moment. "I underestimated you," he said finally, "and I let my fear for your future speak louder than respect for your choices." Rachel nodded. "I know." "I'm sorry," he added. She wasn't sure how long she'd waited to hear those words, maybe her whole life. And yet, now that they were here, they felt almost beside the point, because she had already proven what she needed to prove, not to him, but to herself. "I appreciate that," she said, "and I hope going forward, we can talk as people who respect each other's paths even when they look different." He nodded. "I'd like that," and for the first time in years, she believed he meant it. The weeks that followed felt like slow, steady sunrise. Connect Care moved into a new headquarters downtown, 3 floors, a view of the city skyline, and enough space to house the expanding team. They added a clinical partnerships division, a patient advocacy unit, and a regulatory strategy team. Jasmine finally took a week off and surprised her parents with a check to pay off their mortgage. Rachel bought a condo. Nothing flashy, but for the first time in her adult life, she had a home that wasn't half server room and half sleeping bag. Every day brought stories from patients. A boy in Mumbai who found a trial in Berlin. A woman in Toronto finally diagnosed after years of misclassification. Every story was a small echo of Eliza and a fresh reminder of why they'd said no to $1 billion. And then, one day, Rachel's assistant knocked. "There's a young girl named Sophia here." "And her mother. They said they don't have an appointment, but they really wanted to meet you." Rachel paused. "Sophia?" Her chest tightened. The name rang familiar. Moments later, the door opened and in walked a girl no older than 7, with cautious steps and bright, intelligent eyes. Her mother followed close behind, tears already welling up. "You matched us to a clinical trial 9 months ago," she said. "They said it was a long shot, but it worked. And Sophia, she's walking. She's going back to school." Rachel knelt down, tears threatening. Sophia smiled shyly. "Mom says your computer saved me." Rachel laughed gently. "It wasn't magic, just really good matching." Sophia tilted her head. "I want to build computers like yours." Her mother smiled. "We just wanted to say thank you, in person." Rachel hugged the little girl. "You're why we built this." As they left, Rachel stood at the window, watching them disappear into the world her work had helped make possible. Not a fantasy, not a pipe dream, but real, visible, and permanent. That night, she sat on her balcony, the city lights sparkling below. Jasmine called, breathless with new updates. "We just got EU approval. The platform goes live across 8 countries next month." Rachel grinned. "Let's celebrate soon." But for now, she looked up at the stars, thinking of the nights she thought no one believed in her, not even herself, thinking of the intervention, the silence, the rejection, the slow building back, and the breakthrough. It didn't come in one moment. It came from not stopping. The glass walls of the Connect Care headquarters shimmered in the early light, the city skyline reflecting back at Rachel as she stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching a world she had once thought might never see her. But now it did. The company that had begun on a folding table in a basement apartment was no longer a whisper, it was a standard. 12 countries, over 20,000 patients matched to life-changing clinical trials. Hospitals now sent them inquiries. Governments asked for consultations. The emails no longer began with, "We're not interested." They started with, "Can we schedule a call?" Rachel walked into the main office, where a team of 50 buzzed with calm efficiency. Legal, product, compliance, patient advocacy, people in suits, in scrubs, in hoodies. It was chaos once. Now it moved like a living organism, fast but aligned. She passed Jasmine in the hallway, who gave her a knowing smile. "You sleep?" she asked. Rachel shook her head. "Barely, but I dreamed of Eliza again." Jasmine nodded. "We're about to onboard our 200th clinical partner this month." Rachel smiled. "We used to pray for one." She sat down at her desk just as Amanda, her assistant, knocked gently. "There's someone here to see you. She said her name is Catherine Richardson, and her daughter, Sophia." Rachel looked up, blinking. Her breath caught. "Send them in." A moment later, the door opened, and in walked the same girl who had once been a medical case file, a probability too low for most doctors to touch. But now Sophia was walking carefully, but upright, her cheeks flushed with color, her movements deliberate but determined. A 9-year-old miracle in a pink t-shirt that read, "Girls Code 2." Behind her, her mother held a bouquet of wildflowers and an envelope. Her eyes shimmered, but she held herself with quiet pride. "Miss Bennett," Catherine said softly, "we wanted to thank you again, in person." Rachel stood. She couldn't speak. Her throat was tight. Sophia beamed. "Mom said I could miss school today, to meet you." Rachel knelt and held out her hand. "It's an honor, Sophia." "I want to make something like you did," Sophia said. "I want to build something that helps people." "You already are," Rachel replied. Catherine stepped forward and handed her the envelope. "A letter from Sophia's school. She wrote about you. I thought you might want to keep it." Rachel opened the envelope carefully and read the crooked handwriting. "My hero is Miss Rachel Bennett, because she made something that helped my mom stop crying." She couldn't help it. The tears came quietly, without drama, slipping down her cheeks as she folded the letter and placed it on her desk like treasure. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already said it," Catherine replied. "You said it by not giving up." After they left, Rachel sat in silence for a long time, not working, not checking emails, just feeling. because for years the measure of her worth had been invisible. No revenue, no prestige, no respect. But now the proof was walking out the door in pink sneakers and holding her mother's hand. That afternoon her phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Dinner tonight still on?" "Of course," Rachel replied. They met at a quiet restaurant near the harbor, a place they used to walk past as kids, back when it was too fancy and their family dinners were grilled chicken and debates about SAT scores. Emily ordered wine. "Dad's presenting at the medical conference, so it's just us." "Thank God," Rachel said, laughing. As the food arrived, Emily leaned forward. "I saw the update on the EU rollout. Regulatory approval in record time?" Rachel nodded. "We had to fight for every clause, but we got there. The team's incredible." Emily tapped her fork on the plate. "You know, I've done high-profile work, but none of it feels like this, not even the Dalton case. This, what you've built, is different." Rachel sipped her drink. "It only happened because we didn't stop when everyone told us to." Emily looked at her for a long moment. "I used to envy you. Not the chaos, not the ramen, but the conviction. I had none. I followed the path." "And it worked," Rachel said. "But I didn't choose it," Emily replied. "Not really." Rachel nodded. "Now you are," Emily smiled. "Working with the legal advocacy team at Connect Care, it's the most meaningful thing I've done. Thank you for letting me be part of it." Rachel reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. "Thank you for helping us keep it ours." As they finished dessert, Rachel's phone buzzed again. This time it was Jasmine. A short text. "It's official. We've matched over 20,000 patients." Rachel stared at it for a while. Then she looked at Emily. "Let's go for a walk." They walked by the river, city lights blinking like heartbeats across the water. Rachel took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. "You know," she said, "this all started because I saw a woman cry in a hospital hallway." Emily waited. She'd been turned away from a trial, again. Her son was 12, same age as Eliza, and she said, "All I need is someone to help me find the door." That stuck with me. I didn't want to build the treatment, just the map, the match, the way forward. "And now you've built it," Emily said. Rachel shook her head. "We're building it. Still." When they hugged goodbye, it wasn't formal or awkward. It was real. A week later, Rachel received an award from the National Health Alliance. She stood on the stage in front of doctors, researchers, and lawmakers. But in her mind, she saw the faces of Jasmine, of Sophia, of Eliza, of every patient who had once been invisible. Her speech was simple. "We didn't build Connect Care to make $1 billion. We built it because the system didn't care about the people lost in the middle, and because we believed there had to be a better way to find them, not faster, just fairer. The technology matters, but the people matter more. That's the future I'm building toward." And they stood for her. Not because she'd won, but because she hadn't stopped. That night, she sat again on her balcony. Jasmine texted a picture. A father in Chile holding his daughter, who had just joined a rare pediatric trial. "Another match," the caption read. Rachel smiled. Then, slowly, carefully, she opened her laptop and began drafting a new program. A mentorship fund for women founders in healthcare tech. 10 grants. Quarterly coaching. Everything she never had she would now give away. Because the breakthrough wasn't the $1 billion offer. The real proof was this: that she had built something that would outlive her. that she had been doubted, dismissed, underestimated, and still risen. That her measure of success was never money, but the moments like Sophia's smile, Eliza's tears, Jasmine's loyalty, and her father finally saying, "I was wrong." And perhaps the most radical truth of all, she had always been right to believe.